So hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Fight Chat Friday with TKD Coach Academy. This week we're going to be looking at the front hand as a weapon, as a defensive tool, as a measuring stick to gauge your distance, and as a deceptive ploy to help guide your opponent in the wrong direction so you can take advantage of their movement. So stick with us as we talk through this little topic.
Hey everybody, welcome back. Fight Chat Friday, we're back at it. So this is the first week that we've been doing Fight Chat Friday without a Tuesday session, so it feels like forever since we've been back. Today's topic, as you can see from the title and the thumbnail, is a little bit about the front hand in ITF sparring. So we got some great videos thanks to Espen from Norway, and it gave us the idea of engaging that front hand a little bit more and how much of a weapon it is. And sometimes, I guess, Adrian, people don't realize it, like from the naked eye, of just how much of an impact it has both in attack and defense.
Yeah, I mean, and it all starts as well with, you have to hold it somewhere. You know, we have to make some decisions, and some like meaningful decisions about how do you want to hold your guard. Is your guard dynamic? Does it change as you move through different ranges and different, different techniques? And do we use this to, like, no matter what you do with it, it does send information to your opponent.
Yeah.
We're always talking about this perception-action coupling. And how do we make sure that your opponent isn't getting good information? And, making sure that, that front hand, because it's the closest thing in their visual range, is something that we can use to give them misinformation if we're conscious about how we use it. But so many people will just carry it where they carry it, or they'll try to maintain a guard throughout their entire spar. And it just brings up questions and ideas and different ways that we can look at it. So hopefully the videos today kind of provide a few options, suggestions, ideas,
Yeah. Speaking of options, maybe first we take options that we do have and where we can hold the hands and just have a quick chat through what that means.
Yeah, sure.
So this very much depends on your shot selection, what you're trying to do, the stance you have, full facing, side facing. So you see we have shoulder height, a little lower at the hip height, just out in front. And then we also have a little higher. Some people like to hold it a little higher above the shoulder. And then, of course, we have completely relaxed, which depends on the range you're at. It depends what shots you're trying to engage, your intentions, and maybe what options you do have then with that front hand. So maybe we will take a look at the 4 ways you can have these engaged. I think it's important to actually mix them up a little bit as well, just to be unpredictable. So we look at some options that each one maybe gives us, and we'll see plenty of examples that throughout this video.
Yeah, and I suppose the starting point was, is always the, there's a kind of a traditional boxing guard, if you go back far enough, an awful lot of instructors would have taken over the quite traditional boxing guard, or even something quite like, the Taekwondo guarding block, with one hand about the chin and one, or in the center of the chest, and one hand about shoulder level and out in the front. And, the kind of the guards evolved from that depending on, the nature of the sparring, what's in vogue in terms of the techniques that are effective at a particular point in time. Whether you're, more full facing, more half facing, more side facing, all of these things change the utility of, in particular, that front hand. And I suppose the big difference between us and a sport like boxing, or even like contact kickboxing, is we tend to spar from a greater range. We don't have to worry about, being constrained because there's no ropes. And we do have to worry about that long kicking tool of the leg, so it's typically, we'll usually use the head for defenses in the body movement, and the head lean, as a defense against against the kicks that are coming directly at the head. And we'll tend to use the front hand to cover the body, or to cover the low leg attacks in the first instance. So maybe, maybe that's something to kind of jump in on.
Definitely, yeah. So I do think that, that is the thing that you just said. Like, if you have it very high, you're open to the body. Maybe that's what you want, and that's the option you're trying to give to somebody, to be a step ahead and set a trap. Yeah. And then if you have it very, very low, there's an opportunity that they're going to trap that front hand with their leg, and then it leaves you very much exposed on the top half of your body here, if they're flexible enough to come over the top, or if they can get their hands engaged as well. So we're going to see plenty of examples on all of these. So we'll chat through them and break them down, and hopefully people can take away some points to engage that front hand a little bit more.
So speaking of that, do you want to look at maybe just maintaining distance and giving the impression of distance first? And we have a couple of little examples in this video where, yeah, you can certainly use that front hand just to kind of set out a little bit of a fence, a little bit of a guard against your opponent. And you can see the amount of information Ross here from Ireland is sending with that front hand in terms of, like, you know, probing and testing.
Yeah.
Which does eventually lead him to getting through against Alice there.
Yeah, because it's a real threat. It's like if Alice doesn't respect that, it allows Ross to go directly in. But then at the same time, it allows Ross an opportunity to keep Alice thinking, right, is it going to be my front leg because the distance is a bit further, or is it going to be the front hand? And so that's why for somebody who does favor the legs, it's a massive weapon. Like this example here is a good one where obviously this person is looking to maintain distance to use their leg, and then it allows them to just hold the distance back a little bit.
Yeah, and a very, very, very nice one there where we're looking at the extreme end of it. And so the person, I think when you're looking to throw your kick into someone who's holding that extreme range, the kick tends to be that a little bit longer. And it gives you that option to, or the ability to go through, because the longer kick takes a little bit more of a build up,
Yeah, we have another one here from Urska, and she's trying to keep that long range, and you can see that kicking is her favorite weapon. So as we said, if you do favor that front leg, the front hand is actually very, very important. So some people will take it for granted and it's okay, I just use my front leg, but it's actually so important what you do with your front hand as well. How far you hold it, where you hold it, it gives a different perception of the real distance.
And what it does as well, as you said, is because it is a real threat. If the person does come a little close and your front hand is quite extended, you can immediately go into that front hand, and take whether it's the spear jab or or blitz or just stepping in through it. It does keep that little bit of distance. And as you said, if you're looking to bring your front leg to the hip, to the head, you want that little bit more space. So maintaining an actual threat with the hands at a longer distance is a good way to help maintain some distance for the legs.
Yeah, definitely. And I do think as well it plays in very well with the defensive side kick and the long side kick direct as well. So you see Colm Carroll here in blue from Ireland. He's just trying to close out the match at the end. He's clearly winning 4-0 and he's just making sure he doesn't get hit. So it's a nice, almost like a guard, an extra gauge that you can use. So it's like what you want to do here is keep it in front, almost kind of like just like you're extending your hand, like you can almost push off. You can see here that Colm actually pushes off with that hand and it gives him a little bit of extra distance as well. So you can see like a lot of these will actually play into each other, what we talk about today, like the direct entry and things like that, and blocking, etc. They'll actually play into each other a lot. So once you have it engaged, you have plenty of options.
And just talking about that barrier to entry, once Colm turns sideways and drops the hand that low, he's kind of forcing his opponent to go for the headshot or to try and trap the arm, and it does give him an awful lot more distance to play with. Which, as you said, at the end of a match when you're trying to tail things off or make that defensive side kick an option, it's quite nice. And I mean, equally, if you're if his opponent goes high from that situation, he's got that nice easy kind of hook kick under the leg. So it does give you those options in terms of, as you said, giving your opponent the wrong range to kick on, because kicking against the arm with the arms hanging in front of your body isn't achieving anything for them. They haven't forced movement. So it is definitely quite a useful tool in, as you said, misinforming your opponent about the range or in guiding them towards taking the riskier, longer headshot. So we have that, and we've also talked about having the hand out in the front, as an extended arm, to try and, you're almost kind of threatening on two distances then, because you can still kick, you can still be on kicking range, but what you're saying to your opponent with that longer arm is, but if you try to kick first, I'm willing to go through, so you better get your range and your preparation correct, because I said, if your chamber's a bit too deep, if you pull the knee back a bit too far, if you try to kick a bit too high, if your foot swings up a little bit, if it's more of a shin facing than a foot facing side kick, I've already got my arm extended, I just need to move my body, and like your opponent still needs to come to you. So it gives, I suppose, those options with the arm extended.
And like with the extra line of defense, it's very important as well. You see some people and they hold it very, very close to their body, but you want to almost deal with the problems before they get to you. And that's it kind of plays into some of the other ones we look at, like blocking and guiding it as well later on. But you don't want to deal with the problem when it's on your body. You want to deal with it where it's out nice and safe, and then you can get rid of it nice and early. Maybe that's they're attacking with their leg. So if you have your hand out extended, you have the option to then deal with that problem nice and early before it becomes a problem for you and potentially hitting you.
Well, that's it. And of course, your arm is useless once it's pinned to your body. So if it does start close to your body and your opponent can get the side kick on there, whether anything from the elbow down to the shoulder down to the elbow, once it's pinned to the body, it's not doing anything from there, and you don't have any defense over your front shoulder anymore. So, like we're going to show with some of the later videos, if you can carry your front hand high and follow over the front leg, if you're just looking for that perfect sweet situation where you can actually pin your opponent's arm onto their body, and then they've no defense left. So that as another reason why we might not want to carry it that close to the body.
I think based on that as well, it's important to actually adjust between the options that we've seen at the very start of this video. Is like, maybe you don't want to hold it in the same place all the time, and we'll see some examples of this. So people kind of set rhythms with it, and they test their opponents with it, and they hold it in different ways to kind of keep them guessing. So although the hand's here and you have to respect it, then there's other things going on as well. So it kind of makes your opponent think about two things, and there's multiple threats.
Cool. So we look at those direct shots and direct entries with the front hand maybe next, just to give the simple, it's like this is the equivalent of the going back to the jab in boxing, but in ITF it kind of takes a lot of different forms. We don't tend to step straight to a jab, so it tends to have a different movement to it. Very much just focused on the A to B direct line. Yeah,
and when you talk about that A to B, like traditionally when you teach people to box, you tell them have their elbows tucked in. But you see a lot of this direct stuff is very noticeable that people's elbows are quite high and they're going very straight forward. It's kind of it's almost like pawing at them. It's essentially to get the point as clear and as direct as possible.
Yeah.
So it's not exactly your traditional ideal boxing, but it's very, very effective. And even this one here, I think it's great. It's just like you set out your stall. You're just like, no matter what happens, I'm going to just put that front hand on you. And it's very effective.
That's it. And I mean, whether it was countering the legs or stepping into the hands, it is the same. It is exactly that. It's very, very effective. I mean, it's the huge advantage to it is a straight shot. It is coming from shoulder to head, so it's a very, very straightforward line of action. And then just as I say that, Thomas is a slightly more complex version, but it's from that position.
Still, his hand is in that position that you're on about, isn't it? It's like it's close enough for him to just extend, and that's what the goal is really.
So even from like a self-defense point of view, you want to go with what your body will naturally do as a reaction. So if you set your hand so that it is kind of close to where it wants to go, when you come into contact, when you come into a clash or broken play, it'll just go there because that's what the reaction is. Whereas if your hand is carried down by your hip, or if if you have quite a contrived guard, you're trying to do something that is not natural to do. And I think that's one of the concepts to keep in mind as we go through it, is that the guard should naturally lead to you, we say, following the legs into the hands or following your body position, and there we go, we'll go straight into the hands there because my body position and the position of the hand suggests that I should.
Yeah, and that example was a good one from Bartosz, because he had his hand quite lower, but because his body was actually much closer than that, it was a different perception of the distance. So then it allowed him to kind of sneak it in. Whereas if you kind of, like the one that Dmitri showed here, where a previous clip where the guys had no helmets on from 2019, 2009 in Argentina, that one is an example of actually just going from a very long range, which usually you wouldn't get away with. So it's kind of like, it's again deception. It's like not leaving your opponent know what's really going on, but having it there when you're very, very close, like this example, is definitely effective. And it's just like you can't ignore it really.
And I mean, simply loading that front hand when you realize that your opponent doesn't have or isn't throwing what you'd call a true side kick, where the line isn't correct, it waves up, the chamber is too big, whatever it happens to be, having that front hand loaded means your actions are very simple. You just have to step in or lean in. And so just carrying the hand in the right position and setting the mindset, or setting the frame of mind for what you need to do, can be a huge thing.
Yeah, it can all like we've seen it with some of these clips here. It's almost kind of like the decision is made before it. It's like whatever the next action is, I'm just going to step in on them. And if you have that hand in position, it's very hard to get through that on the other side. And then you can see as well, like there's multiple options here. Like look at all the examples we've taken, and none of them are exactly the same. Whereas there's multiple ways to get into it, like Thomas's way of kind of riding along off the other person's kick. You have the direct entry. You have coming off your own shot. You have Colm Carroll going from a further distance with a test step. Yeah. So there's different ranges, different types you can use, but the principle is the same. It's having that front hand in a position where it's comfortable for you to go direct.
And it tends to open up that front leg turning kick as a natural follow-on. And when both sides are right-legged or both sides are left-legged, it's, making the first and last, as Neil Ernest was saying to us, contacts is a very, very big deal. So if you can get in off of that front hand, it tends to be a very natural thing to have a 1-2 and a front leg turning kick to finish. And that tends to be the engagement an awful lot of the time. And because you're doing that, you're in with that first shot, and the first shot is very clean usually. You've got that arm extending completely, very, very clear on the target. The second one can be a little bit messy, particularly if you've taken the person's balance, because they could be falling away from it. But that last turning kick, especially if it's a headshot, that's the gravy. So, lovely, you've got your 1 point clear shot, but the whole point of that is if you can take the balance, if you can lift the chin, you have that, ability then to take that 3-pointer. And that's a big swing on the scoreboard.
And you get that natural momentum as well. Most of the time, you'll probably end up putting your opponent outside the ring, or maybe they're falling over, or basically, as you said, you're taking their balance. So what advantages can you add on top of that to make the deal even sweeter? For sure.
So where would you like to head next?
Yeah, maybe let's have a look at... Maybe have a look at linking it with the leg. So we had a look at the direct entry. Maybe now let's look at attacking with the leg from a bit of a further distance, and where the front hand can be and the options it gives. So this is definitely from a little bit further out, but you can see that the hands are held in different ways, Adrian. Some people have it a little higher. Some people bring it up as they step, and it gives different options.
I mean, the overall principle is that, you don't want your front hand disengaged while you're kicking. It still has a job to do, and it has a function when you're kicking.
Yeah, like Slovenian competitor here in red, as he lifts, you see he comes up kind of like a puppet master, really. It's like connected with the hand and the leg. And you'll see as they go for a long reach, then the hand may not be up. But by having it there, it's twofold. Number one, it stops your direct counter from your opponent. They have to come around that, which is a trickier job, especially in this stance that we see here with Thomas and Christian. It's not on as much. Whereas in the other stance, you can come around with the backhand if somebody lifts their leg. So that's the first thing that it gives you. It gives you a nice line of defense. And then second of all, if you want to push forward like here after it, or whether you want to attack directly into hands, that hand is in play. Short distance for it to travel.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the other side of things is that, one of the counters that's going to be there, particularly as you said, if you've got the open facing, so right against left, and they spin, you have a hand that's already in position to potentially catch the spin. We'd often see that with throwing a downward kick or throwing a high turning kick in terms of keeping the backhand up to cover the head. And that's something that fighters commonly don't do, which is why that reverse turning kick shot can be so good in right versus right or left versus left kind of matches, where the leg comes up nice and high, the reverse turning kick comes in. You can see most fighters, they carry their backhand quite low. But in the lefty right one, having that front hand carrying high often just means that you can drift it out there and catch the reverse turning kick as it comes over the blindside shoulder as well.
Yeah, definitely. I like this one here from Timothy Boss in the blue. He's given such a good threat with it as well. He's keeping Luke he's keeping him honest really in terms of his reactions. He's making him work for it. But then Luke actually makes a great adjustment, which we might see later on, of what we said. Because the direct line is not there, Luke actually has to come around that. So we'll see it here in the next clip. Because Timothy blocks off that direct entry, Luke has to step around, and you see the kind of like the step and the turn of the hip. That's the only option it gives him. So it was a great reaction from Luke. But Timothy did a great job there to cover off the direct front line.
We can see the challenge there, just to go back on that one, where we have the two hands blocking. So I just want to roll back on that one. So you know, the cross style that we do come across it in WT as well. But that cross style blocking here from the Russian as she goes back. And it's one of those things where the arms can get quite pinned on your body, and you know, it does let Norway in there. And this is Dmitri is again.
Yeah, very cheeky, but such a good shot at the same time. It's like his kick is there, but like look how extended. It's like a spear, almost like jousting you see in medieval times, where like it's already extended and he just leans forward into you. It's a great shot.
Yeah, and I mean this is an advantage that flexible people have as well, isn't it? Like, so if you're able to keep your body tall over your high front leg, you can connect the foot to the hand much more quickly. So you know, again, coming from a point fighting style. The longer kick to the body, or the fast kick right down on the hip, connected to the front hand back fist, you know, that kind of a combination, or even the kick as a feint and dropping into the front hand can be quite, you know, a regular combination. But when you come to the continuous side of things, being able to threaten that high line and come directly down onto the hands before it takes away an opportunity to split the rhythm on you and you know, and come inside you. So that whole thing of taking the front leg quite high, threatening between the elbow and the head, and then immediately the hand over the top is a little bit of a nightmare to deal with, because you have to deal with the leg then, because there's going to be no gap. Because usually we want to let the leg drop and attack the dropping leg. So we want to, you know, attack the hip as the leg drops, or come through the leg as the hip as the leg drops. But if it doesn't, if what happens is the leg drops as you get punched in the head, you now have no gap there. So you either have to like concede and move off, or you have to deal with the first intention, which is the leg coming up there. So you have to deal with that immediately. And that just puts a little bit of additional pressure on there. And because flexible people usually can carry the leg a little bit or put a bit of pressure on with it. And I think Vitaly does that quite nicely on the guys' side of things. And there are plenty of the girls that do this very, very well, from, you know, the likes of Tyra Barada or Nina Meppelder, and you know, some of them, they do it so well in terms of put that leg up there, threaten the face, and then there's the hand.
Yeah, definitely. And that actually comes to what we speak about a lot, and other or ways of doing sidekick correctly. It's like that posture is so important. It's like if you can keep your body upright, you have that front hand engaged then, and it's an option. Whereas if you have to lean a lot to carry your kick, that front hand isn't going to be in play as much, as well as the point of not being able to really threaten with that leg as quickly. So it's a twofold thing again. So it just shows the importance of keeping your posture when you're trying to carry that front leg too.
Cool. So we have a little bit of a look at rhythm and using the hand to kind of test and set, and again, give bad information, I suppose is a little bit of a unifying theme for different ways we can use that front hand.
And I think a lot of countries like Norway and Sweden in particular really like this style, and it's kind of like using it with the front leg. It's trying to test your opponent, see what their reactions are like, see how they're going to react to you moving in a certain way. And if it's done really like there's some people that they carry it and they can have it in your face and you don't even know, because it seems like it's a natural rhythm of the way they move their body, and then like that hand is in play and they can just go.
Yeah, and we can even see late on in this clip where, you know, the hand is floating from those little kind of low jabs to the high jabs kind of thing, just in terms of the testing. But it disguises some shortening steps as well, and allows Norway to come directly into hands as well here as we get into it. So, you know, there's those tests there are tests with the feet that don't have hands, there are tests with the hands that don't have feet, and then sometimes there's a little bit of both. So the hand test comes in there and disguises that footwork and the shortening step, a little bit like here, and then there's another example in a moment as well.
Yeah, you can see how it's always in play. It's just if you can get that extension, like we seen from some of the options on the direct line earlier, if you can use those well, then you're in, and it's a clear shot. And as you said it earlier, Adrian, then that allows you to kind of get some continuation and set up the turning kick to the body or the head or whatever. So it allows you an entry, and we speak a lot about entries, and it's just another way of you keeping your opponent guessing. Like this is a great example. Is it going to be the leg coming? Is it going to be the hand coming? And just extending. If you particularly have good reach on your arms, it's very, very threatening for your opponent, and it builds the tempo as well, doesn't it?
Well, it does. And I mean, you can build an awful lot of tempo off of it and a lot of tension in your opponent by not doing an awful lot of work. I mean, moving the upper body or swaying the upper body and moving the front arm is definitely less intense. You know, there's not an awful lot of bouncing going on. There's not feints and leg lifts and stuff that are quite tiring, endurance wise. So it is a way to, along with just stepping into your opponent's range and putting them in a slightly uncomfortable position, they are different ways of like increasing the tension in the match and increasing the tempo of the match for sure.
It kind of it reminds me, I know TKD Tube did a great video on using your hands as sine wave and patterns recently. And it kind of reminds me of that as well. It's kind of like people kind of disguise their sine wave with hand movements, but it's a similar way, but in a good way for sparring.
Yeah.
It's because it's like by using your hand, you kind of have to work less on your feet, and you can just kind of sneak in gradually as well, or you can adjust your stance to whatever way you want it. So it takes the visual away from what else is going on because there's so much happening with the hand.
And I think there's a rhythmic thing that maybe goes underappreciated, because like it's very easy for us to bounce and lift the hands and drop the hands as we bounce, or maybe we go forward, we bring the front hand forward, we go back, we bring the front hand back. So those kind of things are very natural and everybody can pick them up. But to use your hands, and to interrupt and confuse rhythms and do all of those things, and to do that naturally in motion, is like learning to play drums. So, you've got one foot doing this thing on this rhythm, you've got the other foot doing this thing on this rhythm, and you have hands and they're changing rhythms and changing directions. And the four limbs are playing potentially, like in sparring, it probably won't be all four, but you've got different limbs playing different rhythms. And so, if I can be going forward as I'm pulling my hand, going back, extending the hand, changing the heights as I do so, having the hands moving at a different speed to my legs, or, those things are visually very distracting for your opponent. So as long as you're not getting distracted thinking about it, and it's something that you have as part of, your practice routine, and it's natural, then you can use the interruptions and the splits in rhythm that provides to, take an advantage over your opponent. And like someone who's bouncing with one hand in place in the front and a hand by the chin and bouncing in a steady bounce is much easier to attack and to threaten than someone whose distance is changing, whose body position and alignment is changing, whose hands are at different heights. It's much more difficult to select the right range and type of attack against that person. And that paralysis of analysis that you're going to get yourself into means you
all out that they have to react to. So it is very, very effective. So if you can set that rhythm, it just allows you to be unpredictable while you're in control and you have the driving seat. And then once you start to kind of build a predictable rhythm, that's the flip side, then you have an opportunity to break that rhythm. So you can either have completely unpredictable and messy rhythm, which people can't get a read on, which makes it very hard for them to kind of attack, direct, or counter you. And then you have the flip side of that as well. If you kind of prefer that more steady state, then you can set a rhythm and then break that rhythm on a half beat as an opportunity, as an entry.
For sure. So maybe that's a good little segue into guiding and directing. So using that front hand to like inform our opponent again. And it occurred to us after we kind of pulled these videos together that there was a couple of good examples we should have gone looking for, but it's still enough to show. You can see Cian in this case is opening his hands. He's inviting that front leg in. And, it's telling his opponent, come get me, with the intention, it's not perfect, but with the intention of bringing in, and a similar thing from Adam here, leaving the body open, inviting the shot, because they're looking for the opportunity to suck it in, make them overdo the distance and bring in the backhand.
What a shot that was from Adam as well. And then he came around the back door to score that front hand as well. Savage shot. So then we see it here. Lovely one from Luke. We already touched on this clip because the direct line is cut off from Timothy. Luke knows that, so he has to step around that direct line to get his backhand involved. So you can see his experience there is shown. Very, very important. Here's another one as well. You can kind of see, is this blocking? Is it guiding? But basically, he's controlling the front leg of Timothy to get it out of his line. If he doesn't, he's getting nailed there and he's going to be probably on his back. Yeah, and I think the big thing we're looking at there is the, in that case, it's the hook over the shoulder. But what we're looking at in all of these examples is, the idea that you're giving the information that tells your opponent where to put their shot. And in doing that, you increase your percentage odds of making a good counterattack, or, making the next part of it work. And, whether that's like that, lining up a backhand, whether it's in this case, Luke leaving his front hand trailing across the body,
He's carrying his front arm very much horizontally across his body here, which is inviting Timothy to kick under, and lets him take that, that shovel to the side, and then, carrying it long into the front. Then later on, when it comes to the, this part of it here, it's because he's moving away there to his left, Timothy's invited to kick to close him off, and then he changes direction. So I guess that's kind of what we're heading to with the idea of this one, the guiding, leading, and misdirecting. Your hand sends signals, your body movement in conjunction with your hands sends signals, and if you can capitalize on that, then away you go.
Yeah, definitely. And it's just like that kind of step off the direct line as well is like that pivot counter step hook is a nice one as well, because although you're not guiding and giving them a cue where to go, it's kind of like the matador, you're guiding them along as you step off to the side. So it's the twofold one there as well. With, like, first of all, you're trying to give them something to go for, and then once they take it, you guide along the leg along a different path, and then you're a step ahead and you get a nice counter off.
Yeah, it's psychological there as well. So I mean, we'll see this again with the pulling to shoot, but even in that last one, Louise, where you've given a consistent distance back. I'm giving up this much space. I'm giving up this much space as you come forward. So you're inviting the person to go and stretch a little longer and and catch you as you move back the predictable amount of distance. And if at the same time then you shorten or you make your steps the angle, you've taken advantage of the information that you've given your opponent. So you've told them, I'm going to go straight back. I'm going to go straight back. And when they then go straight one more time, you can be at the angle, you can do something different. So, and when you watch matches back, it often does follow a rhythm like that. Well, I'll show you twice, and then we go, because there has to be enough for a person to get subconsciously or consciously, like, into their heads that this is going to be a repeated behavior. So if you want someone to kick under your arm, you have to show them your arm there for a little while, or you have to bounce it up to that position in a rhythm repeatedly, so they can see that it's happening, so that the shot is going to come. I have to leave my hand down and leave my head forward to invite that headshot. I have to actually give the signal. So it's conditioning. Like, it's like, in terms of psychology, it's operant conditioning. We're informing something good will happen. We're playing on what they already know. Oh, if they leave their head forward like that and their hand low, I'm going to get a headshot. They know this from their training. So when I leave the hand low and give them the headshot, it gives me my counter.
Yeah, and it's not always conscious decisions from athletes either. A lot of time this is just like from their training, just the natural rhythm they understand from ITF sparring, from doing rounds on rounds on rounds. They just understand that this natural rhythm occurs. And sometimes they don't even think about it. I'm sure if you got all these clips and asked the individual fighters about that, I'm sure they would say a lot, maybe 50% of them are just subconscious reactions that they just know subconsciously are on, and they just go for them. So it's kind of like giving that rhythm. It's not always a conscious thing. Sparring is both conscious and subconscious, of course, because of the whole idea of chunking.
Yeah, so we're giving them the information they're expecting. So, it's like that as well. And we've spoken about this before. If you're under pressure with the last 10 seconds and you need a headshot, well, offering the person the headshot means they'll probably take it. So it's, even if it's not a good choice for them at the time, knowing that they need it and then showing them the availability of it is going to play with their subconscious, because their coach is telling them, they in their own head know they need it. When they see the opening in the cue, they'll take it, which is great if you already knew it was coming, because then you can counter. Then it's
not the one that will score, probably.
Yeah, exactly. So looking at this then, let's play with that. So we're pulling the person in now and using that front hand to help us pull the person in so we can shoot with the front hand.
Yeah. So this is bridging the gap then. It's like playing with attack and defense. This one is vital that you set your feet and you're on balance, because you have to switch the direction very, very quickly. So it's kind of linking into some of the ones we spoke about earlier. It gives the person an opening to go for, and you pull them in, you draw them in, and then when the rhythm is correct, the timing is correct, then you get an opportunity to shoot back yourself. So you pull them in to push back at them yourself.
Yeah, and you absolutely have to have your distance. That's going to be a feature. This is a cheeky one.
Yeah, nice one from Julio here. He recognizes that there's an opportunity. He almost probably sells him the dummy there, as they say, but it's a nice one. Cian does it really well. He's always on balance, and he always has the opportunity to the opportunity to shoot back. Then again, so that's the important thing, really. It's just like if you have a good sense of the distance and the timing of the bout, and if you have a good balance set under your feet, then you can just easily push and pull and set that shot up quite nice.
Yeah, I mean, I think Julio's one there is also a bit of an example of misdirection with the hands, because, you know, it's a bit of gamesmanship for sure, but like, how often have you seen it, like, where you say, okay, I point over here, I look over here, and as the person starts to move over there, I move the other way. You know, that little bit of misdirection is you know, is absolutely fine and natural, and, you know, showing the, you know, that high front hand before going to the body, you know, it's the old chestnut. Like, that's been done so many times before, where you make that extension high and then you kick in low. But the on the pulling side of it, like, really it is about making it inviting enough that your opponent feels that they can cover that distance. So you can't let them miss by a lot. If I make too big a movement back and they miss by a foot, they okay, and they change. Where you want them to miss by a fraction, or even having that floating arm in the front, having them making contact with the arm and soaking it up to where, you know, they're going to feel like, I'm getting there, I'm very close, I just need to stretch that little bit more, and that's allowing them to fall off balance so that you can shoot. And I think that's the plan.
Yeah, you can see how like they actually link up a lot of the ones we spoke about today. So like the guiding, the distance management, the rhythm, they all connect in a way then as well. If you can pull them all together, then they're very, very effective. So that's what we're saying. A lot of these things, it takes you to kind of break it down in slow-mo and to look at it in depth to understand. So imagine when you're in the ring, these things definitely don't become obvious. And that's exactly the point here that Henning is making as well.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, what he's saying there is, if you are still in that, you know, very conscious state of performance where, you know, you go with that old kind of 4-quadrant thing of the, you know, unconscious competent is where you want to be, where you don't have to think about making the rhythm happen and you can focus on the game state and what you're actually doing in the ring. That's the ideal. But at some point, as you're learning, you have to try to introduce these rhythms into your training, into your sequences, and initially they'll be quite clunky. They're, you know, the changes of rhythm, the moves will be more obvious. It'll be bounce, bounce, go, bounce, bounce. You know, it'll follow a predictable rhythm, and with time and with a little bit of, as you said, the chunking element of it coming in there, some of it will become more natural, and you'll have still readable, I suppose, if someone is studied enough, still nothing's ever completely random. So you will fall into your own rhythms and your own patterns, but if they're difficult to track, and they don't need to be crazy, they just need to be a little bit less than, you know, every second one or everyone's the same. Once they're a little bit more difficult to track, your opponent has enough to be thinking about consciously and subconsciously that they're not going to keep it all like front of brain, and they're going to get caught out. So definitely, I think, as Henning has pointed out there, we're aiming to go towards that subconscious.
And that was like, everybody knows Colm Carroll's blitz and how it's set up. But still, because when you're in real time against it, it tricks the brain because the rhythm is different. It's like it's in, out, bum, bum. And that change of rhythm, and with the test step that he uses, it just allows the entry, and then he's on top of you before you know it. So it's like that. It's for the brain to recognize it. It's almost selling it a dummy. But that has to be trained in by Colm, so he knows it's on. But it's something that he's trained so much and something that he's so comfortable with that he's able to do that without thinking, based on the perception action, again, that we always speak about, because of what he sees and the options that are available. And like, the only thing that you really will be consciously aware of in the ring are particular decisions. Yeah. So you can't think of like how you actually execute, whether it's techniques, whether it's footwork. If you're thinking about that in the ring, you're way behind. And psychologically, it's not a good place to be, because then you're not really in sync with your actions and what you're thinking. So the only thing that you should really be conscious about is like a decision. So, okay, I need to up the pace here, or okay, I need to do this, but not how you do it in terms of how you execute it. I mean, if you're thinking about it that much, then like you're not going to be able to pull it off in a live situation.
Yeah, I think so, definitely. So, will we look at some blocking? I think we do have a little bit of, there we go. Just a little bit looking at the, I think this is correct.
So just having that extra line of defense there as well, isn't it? I think this is Timothy Boss and Ryan Shelley, but they both carry their front hand quite well, and just having that extra line of defense as well is important.
Yeah, and again, we'd always teach when we're talking about the. I'm not sure that's the right clip, Richie. When we're thinking about the blocking, what we're really thinking about in that sense is the likes of the really slipping the foot out of the way, because we're not talking about holding the hand to the body. We're not talking about bringing the hand, like that's a very much a last ditch attempt, I suppose. So in terms of you might just roll the hand up there just to stop the headshot, but we're not reaching towards a kick. We're not trying to put the hand between us and a kick to interrupt it most of the time. So the blocking is either passive, because the front hand is floating in front of the body and we're going to kick into the arm or into the shoulder. It's a passive kind of a blocking thing. It's just absorbing the kick because the distance was wrong or whatever it happens to be. Or it's more on that guiding sense where, you've left a space so that you can move the foot offline as you counterattack or as you avoid in your stepping. And I think, that's definitely the blocking that we refer to. Maybe even the likes of, interrupting, where, if you have your front hand over the heel as you're stepping through to your backhand, to stop the person's foot coming up into position. It's definitely more that I was thinking of, certainly when we were talking about the blocking side of things.
And I think the term interrupting is actually more practical, because if you block and you hold your position, chances are you're just going to take the shot on the arm and you're going to just kind of get blown back. Whereas when you really want to block and use your front hand, you need to kind of step into that range. So interrupting, I think, is actually very important in terms of just the thinking behind this, because you can't just stand and hold your range. You have to actually, it's like that car crash kind of mentality. You have to come in with that as well. So that's what we're thinking about here. When you block, it's not a block of like traditional block of just stand and hold your ground. It's almost more of a kind of deflect.
Yeah.
So this is a good example as well of like Luke just pushes the leg to the side. So they're not always like a big strong block like you think. It has to be done with another motion. So if you kind of stand in the position and you just put your hand there and block and stay, it's not going to work, because you have to think what's next. Like, it's most effective if you can link it up with another technique. So we're seeing with Louise here, she kind of blocked the leg as she jumped into a counterattack of her own. So it has to be done in motion. You can't just hold your ground and like block traditionally.
Yeah, and I think that's actually the mental thing that happens. Like when you start coaching, you're working with people who are coming from a beginning state. Like, blocking turns off the ability to move the rest of your body and to flow with the match. I think once you commit your brain to, I'm going to block this because maybe I've been kicked once or twice or whatever, and I'm going to do something about this. And you often see it where they try to slap down a side kick or shovel the side kick out of the way, and the person coming forward just pumps, and the hand completely misses and they get whacked again, or they shift to high. And so what's happened is, the person has become rooted to the spot. They've committed to their position because they're trying to stand strong and make a strong block. And what tends to happen then is you become a punch bag, you become a target. And it's not good. Whereas if you're in motion, what you're actually doing really is covering. So it's the insurance policy of, I'm getting my body out of the line, but I'll also have the insurance policy of bringing my hand through to make sure that the foot is guided and they can't adjust back onto the line. Or the shot is coming in towards the head. My hand was just there anyway, so it's a cover, as well as deflecting. So we definitely have a different priority when it comes to our blocking actions. It's not really the traditional sense as we would have in a complete stopping block like you might have in pattern.
Yeah, ideally you want a hybrid for both hands. You want one to maybe block and one to attack at the same time. So you don't want to just hold your ground, as you said. So like ideally, like the hierarchy for me would be number one to kind of avoid, and like the last ditch is just like cover and block completely. So in between that, then you have the option of actually taking advantage of the situation where they're trying to engage and you block and go at them at the same time. It flips the tide.
Yeah. So I thought we might just come back and look at those kind of various hand positions that we find ourselves in and just talk through like the where and when maybe for each of these. So just looking at Vitali coming in here, I think, and that high hand position and why we end up there. So do you want to lead off
I love
on
this.
that?
I love this one. It's kind of like what we spoke about earlier with carrying the leg. First off, it takes away any opportunities for Kieran here in red, at least on the straight line. As well as that, it allows Vitaly the option of, if he can get a bit of a run on the opponent, that he has his front hand ready to engage the hands, because that's the natural progression really. Once you engage with the carry, you're probably not going to kick again directly. Chances are you're going to be into hand range next, and it's ready to shoot there as well. So it's a defensive technique and the opportunity for the next attacking technique.
Yeah, definitely. And as you said, it is allowing some natural kind of stuff to happen. So, you know, if you land and the hand is just there, you will punch just because it's just there. Yeah. So
one of the other things about that one as well, actually, Adrian, is if you like extend at your maximum range, so like if you just have to go to your limit to kind of like reach for a shot, the hands are actually in a good position as well to kind of like counter your center of gravity. Whereas like if your hands are just hanging down, it's much difficult. It might be one where you're just kind of like at the end of your motion. You don't want to reach maximally on every single kick, because then it becomes very predictable. So it might be just like, okay, that shot's on if I get my full reach, and then the hands might kind of come out into that, like, I don't know, starfish mode or whatever, which can happen very often at that very long range.
It does. But I mean, that's one of the things as well that, you know, you're looking for in a counter. So if the kicks are tight and sharp, but they're not stretching too far, backhand can stay by the chin and stay covered. But the further you stretch out, the more likely that the body shape just makes it, and the balance requirements of the kick make it that the hands will extend, which does leave you open. I mean, you can see as the kick is coming forward here, there are openings. The back hip's open, the head's open, but you've got to get there under timing pressure as you're under threat from that shot. So, this is the case of, like, this is the Napoleon one, where a good attack is the best defense, you know. So, like, that's really what you're looking at, is making the attack, aggressive, fast enough, threatening enough that the defense is compromised. Where if you can be calm under that and at the right distance, there are openings, but finding them is the challenge, you know. So
yeah, the high knee as well is a big factor.
Yeah, that's covering most of the body. So we have then this one, the more relaxed one, and this is Luke, who you wouldn't say is the most relaxed fighter in the world, but the guard can be quite relaxed at times.
Yeah, and obviously this one, like, he's out of range, so like there's a time and a place to kind of carry that hand. But you see his backhand is in position. Luke will like to kind of carry that front hand nice and long, and if he gets the opportunity to kind of jam and close down the space by taking that shot on the long front arm and then driving that backhand in, that's a nice shot that Luke likes. But then you can see as well that it's obviously an option when you're out of contact, you're out of you're completely out of range where there's nothing happening. But there is an opportunity that if somebody does engage, that you can step in and take that shot on the arm and close down the space and come in with your backhand.
Well, that's the thing. So even in that completely relaxed state, as you turn to your side, you basically have absolutely nothing scoreable from your shoulder down to your below your hip. So, that relaxed guard does mean that as long as your opponent can't threaten your head, you can turn sideways and completely cover your body against the side kick or whatever. So I think it's useful in that sense as well. And the other thing is, if you've had a very, very busy front hand and it's been there and then it drops, even if your body hasn't moved, it looks like you've gotten further away, and there's a tendency maybe for your opponent to move in a little bit. So what often follows this busy front hand dropping to the relaxed is then launching into the blitz or launching the high front leg, where you're inviting the person into the space by taking that threat out of their visual space, back down here, putting it somewhere nice and safe. You're saying, okay, you can come closer now. And that's the message that you're sending. So you can come closer now, and then it lets you attack directly from there. So again, some people, if you look at that out of context, it's just a bad guard. But the context is incredibly important.
Context is key.
Yeah,
that's it. And as well, it's the fact here as well that it changes your body positioning. So whatever guard you do have, like, the higher the hands go, the more square on you'll tend to go as well. Yeah. Whereas the more side facing you want, the more kind of bladed the hands will be in a way. So that's important as well to take into context what range you're in, what are the intentions of the fighter, what is the shot selection they like to have. There's many things at play.
Definitely. Then we were into the
I think
the mid-ground.
That's it though, isn't it, Adrian? Like when we're talking about that, it's like what is your intention? And everybody, if you just kind of carrying your front hand for the sake of it willy-nilly and it's just there, like that's what we're talking about not doing. It's like it doesn't matter what your intentions are once you know what's at play with the option that you have. So like it's just kind of being proactive about where you do carry your hand, not just leaving it float around. So we always get that question of why do Taekwondo fighters just carry their hands down by their side? It's like there's 90% of the time there's a reason for it.
Well, yeah, there is, and some of it, of course, is just they're being casual because they're far away.
Yeah.
But there's that element of if someone is standing, in an engageable distance and they're dropping their hands, there's probably a good reason. You hope there's a good reason for it. Either that or they're about to get smacked. But Adam here with the kind of the shoulder high carry, like in this looks like almost like a transitional phase where the front leg has dropped and we're looking to come to hands. Like this would be a typical thing where you've come from that side facing and now we're kind of coming a little bit more towards that classical boxing guard, or a little closer to it at least. But that mid ground tends to be much more of I'm going to go do some punching now. It doesn't tend to be I'll bounce at a distance from you and have my hands here. That doesn't tend to happen. You'll tend to relax the shoulders more at a longer distance, but the shoulders will start to come up a little bit more. The hands will start to come forward a little bit more. The elbow will lift. Once that front leg kick is maybe a little bit less of a threat, which then, counterintuitively, then that means that, well, once the person's in close, that's where that back kick, or the tall body turning kicks to the hip, etc., become a real threat because, well, the elbows have come up to deal with the punching problem, and because the elbows have come up, that belt high range and that center of mass is open, and so being able to transition hands to feet allows you to attack those target areas. But a good middle guard is very necessary, that kind of position is very necessary as you transition into hands, I find.
Yeah, the hands are in play, and what I talk about with my students is just keeping the hands tidy. This is what I mean by it. Just have in them, and just knowing Adam from like years and years of training with him and seeing many of his fights, I know that what's happening here is that he's opening up the body a little bit more half facing, inviting the side kick off the front leg from his opponent, and because of the reach that he has, he's going launching at you the minute you lift your toe off the mat with that front hand and coming right through. And
again, I can kind of just I think it's Sweden there, so it's probably
I think so,
but at that stage where like he's tricky and his range is tricky, so you're definitely going to have to invite him to overextend, and I think that you're probably right on that count. But this is actually for me probably one of the guys that you move through. I don't think you stay in this position particularly long. You move through it, because then when you get into the hands range, the hands will tend to come up even more. But when you're on your way in, or when you're at a slight distance and you're inviting, that tends to be the position you end up in. And then from Fatty here, and a nice bit of team sparring with Tiziano.
The plus 85 versus the minus 57.
Yeah, and actually that's quite a relevant thing as well as to why your guard might change. So if you had Tito here sparring up, he's still carrying his hands low. He's not worried about the hands at all, in this position, or he's inviting the hands, maybe is another way to put it, because his way to score is he's going to either get a counter side kick on the body, just on clipping that belt, or he's going to be pulling Fatty around until he gets a clear line to go into hands. So that's where he's at, that he wants Fatty to leave the legs alone and go to hands in a lot of ways. But the reverse of that, Fatty needs to carry a lower guard because his opponent's smaller. He needs to worry about that front leg sneaking under his guard and onto his hip. You won't, if you're taller, you're not going to see that line the same way as the person who's smaller. You won't see the way through. So that lower guard is important. But that tends to be the more casual, or like the guard that you'll have at normal kicking distance. You might even drop the backhand a little more if you're lazy, but the backhand will usually be held somewhere handy. The front hand is usually out there. That soft elbow. What's that?
Pardon the pun. Handy.
Handy. Yeah, exactly. But, that is probably, for me, the most common, guard that you'll see for most of a match. Some variation on what Fatty has there.
Yeah, well, I always tend to say to my students is wherever you feel most comfortable and most natural, but have it somewhere between your elbow and your shoulder, ideally, roughly around that area. Basically, we want it engaged and we want it at play. If you just have it just hanging down by your side, like the example with Luke all the time, and your only intention is just to leave it there, then that's not a good place to be. If somebody can pick up on that, it takes away so many options you have. We've seen all the options it gives you by having your front hand in play. Such a simple thing.
Yeah.
So it allows you to have so many options, both in attack and defense, by having it in play. By not having it in play, you have yourself at a major disadvantage, in my opinion.
Yeah, and the difference here between a photo and a video is that, like, we're seeing hands in a static position, and that tends to be the way if people learn out of a manual, you hold your hands here. And you don't. The hands should be in movement and working and reacting with your body. But loosely speaking, as you said, if the guidance is, somewhere between your elbow and your shoulder is a nice place to carry that front fist, the elbow will tend to be a bit lower. You'll tend to have the palm a bit more forward, things like that. The backhand will tend to float somewhere between the chin and the solar plexus, and lower is very deliberately relaxing, but if it's just hanging there somewhere between the chin and the solar plexus, it's easy to pick it up to deal with a threat or to carry through and go and punch. So I think there's the kind of general guidelines on where do you begin, and then everything else is the context. Why do you adjust? How do you use it? And I think what you do is you start with beginners with hold it around here, and then let's see what naturally develops, because the blink reflex or flinch reflex is better if the hands are in a good place. And then you start to think a bit more deliberately about what am I doing with my hands and why. In the same way as initially you bounce and then you throw your kicks. Then it becomes like the push and pull and the feints and the changes of distance and all of that kind of stuff kicks in. You're doing the exact same with the hands, and even more fun, you're doing it all at the same time. So what do your hands add to the information that your opponent is getting, and how do you take away from the information that they're getting? How do you use both hands and your footwork to change the perception of distance, or to actually disguise a change of distance and things like that? Do your hands give away whether you're going to kick or punch next? Because for some people, of course, the hands will drop and the shoulders will lean if they're going to kick next, or they'll raise before if they're going to kick first. These little giveaways are things that you can use. Maybe you could raise your hands and then go to hands. You can play off of that. So I think there's a bit of if you're a competitor, look back at your videos and see what you do, and then decide, do you want to eliminate it, or do you want to keep feeding that information out there and then use that information as misinformation to catch your opponent off guard?
The takeaway message is just have a plan with your front hand, know what you're doing, know what you're about, have them engaged, and where you have it then based on that plan is up to you. And we've seen like most of the top level guys adjust anyway, so that sometimes they have it high, sometimes they have it low, depending on different things that they want to see. A lot of time it's always engaged, and that's the most important thing, and that's the takeaway message from this. Hopefully people got some ideas of what they can do based on their positioning of it, and how they can put that into play both in attack and defense, and in the interim as well to maybe transition between both. So hopefully there were some good ideas that people did take from this. If there was, make sure to hit this video a thumbs up, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and make sure to hit the bell notification so you don't miss us next Friday. We'll be live again.
For sure.
Drop in the comments as well if you have any big takeaways or anything that you'd like us to cover similar to this topic with something else. It would be good to get some suggestions in. I really enjoyed this one today, breaking down something nice and small, but which is a major thing in ITF.
Oh, absolutely. So folks, until next Friday, we'll see you soon.
See you then, everybody.